Morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you at the FP&A Trends webinar. My name is Olga Rudakova. I'm a FP&A professional, data storytelling trainer, and FP&A board ambassador. I will be happy to facilitate this evening for you tonight. The topic of today's webinar is transforming FP&A processes through advanced analytics. This is quite a hot topic in our FP&A community. It has attracted almost 700 registrations from 62 different countries. Let me walk you through the agenda of the event. What we are going to speak about tonight will be stages of FP&A analytics maturity. Then we'll speak about connected FP&A and agile scenario planning. We will touch scenario management insights. We'll have conclusion, recommendations, and certainly Q&A session. Now it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our speakers of the event. My dear panelists, please join me here on the webcam, and let me start introductions with you, Arslan. Our first speaker for the evening will be Arslan Hafiz. Arslan is a FP&A Director International at Astra Zeneca Rare Disease. Arslan is a keen professional with over 15 years of experience who strongly believes in continuous learning with a desire to improve processes and add tangible value to the business. Arslan, we are happy to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Olga. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. And a second speaker for the evening will be Alex Bayred. Alex is a Director Corporate FP&A at Owens Corning. Alex is a passionate finance leader with more than 27 years of experience in driving multi-million-dollar growth and profitability. Alex, we are glad that you can join us tonight.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. Always a pleasure.
Good. And the last speaker for the evening will be Lawrence Servan. Lawrence is a FP&A thought leader and author. He's a regional director at Board International. Lawrence is a Fortune 500 EPM executive. He's software company founder, Deloitte and KPMG finance transformation management consultant, and award-winning book author. Lawrence, we are happy to have you with us tonight.
Glad to be here.
Right, and let me introduce to you FP&A Trends Group. For many of you, it's International FP&A Board, which is based in 27 cities in 16 different countries. But beyond that, it's actually FP&A education with lots of online resources, webinars, and workshops. And as well as it is a strategic advisory and research body. So make sure to discover all different areas of FP&A Trends Group activity. What we can expect tonight? Tonight, we are going to have 1 hour webinar. We expect your participation in 2 interactive polls on the webinar subject. We certainly try to answer most of your questions during Q&A session at the end, and you can start asking your questions right now. Presentation for this event is already available in handouts section of this GoToWebinar, but you will receive the recording and the presentation after the meeting. Please take part in the short survey right after the session. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Now it's time for me to thank our technology partner, Board. Board helps you to reach your goals and drive digital transformation across your organization. Before we go into the topic as such, before we hear our panelists speak, let me introduce to you our FP&A Board maturity model. The board itself covers 6 different areas of FP&A maturity. It speaks about leadership, functional skills, business partnering and collaboration, process, data and analytics, and technology. Today, I want to focus on one aspect, which is data and analytics. This model works with several maturity stages: basic level, developing level, defined, advanced and leading levels. And if we look at analytics we use throughout this maturity model, we usually start at the developing stage when we use basic P&L reports and we use some descriptive analytics. So basically we know what has happened. Nevertheless, at the intermediate stage, we start adding diagnostic analytics. So we actually start getting answer to the question, why has it happened? Understanding the reasons. But at the leading stage, we add predictive and prescriptive analytics. Not only the type of analytics changes with this maturity, but many other aspects, such as data entry automation. If we start with manual entry, we'll end with automated data exchange. Besides that, we start using more and more business drivers, understanding them for our businesses and including them in our multi-dimensional scenario modeling. So today we'll speak about how to achieve this leading stage. What should we do to actually get there? And we will start with our first presentation. We will hear Arslan Hafiz speaking about stages of FP&A analytics maturity. Arslan, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Olga. So let me, first of all, as Olga introduced already, I work in Astra Zeneca in the Rare Disease Business Unit for as an FP&A Director for International Region. So it's a pleasure to be here to actually talk about what we can do to revive the view of the FP&A and also be ready for the future FP&A organization. So what you can see here in the chart here, you can see that the more hindsight we are looking at, on the left side you will see the value, and the right hand side you see the difficulty. The focus is, or the aim is, to shift more towards the right side, where we are going from hindsight to insight and actually foresight, or more of the from descriptive to prescriptive analytics. Okay, so what we do is, the more value we want to add, we want to look more at the future. So if you see the traditional budgeting and planning, it has mainly been focused on descriptive or diagnostic analytics, etc., looking mostly on the backward looking or mostly reacting organization. However, the advanced budgeting and planning, or we can say the future looking forward, is actually more on the driver-based forecasting and planning process. So what we should be doing is, I mean, if we look at the next slide, I can talk about the cultural shift that we actually need, and we need to shift from what to why and how. So first thing I would like to say is, like, why we feel stuck into what has happened or why did that happen. One, first of all, I mean, we know that we have a huge amount of data nowadays, and because of all the tools and tools that we have available, it's we have a huge amount of data, and we feel stuck by actually analyzing a lot of data, and also because because of our numbers, being finance professionals, we enjoy working with numbers, we enjoy working or utilizing our analytical skills that we have gained during our career. So one important thing which is important to highlight and we need to learn is that past cannot be undone. What the best thing we can do from past is actually learn from it and take some corrective or some actions that can actually improve the future that we are going to face in future. So to do that, a few things what we can do, of course, we need to make sure that we understand the real drivers of the business, rather than talking about only, okay, for example, just the revenue is gone up or the OPEX is gone down. We need to really understand the business. We need to start thinking about the real drivers behind those the revenue upside. So for example, in our organization, rather than just talking about, okay, what the variance is, like revenue is gone up or revenue is gone down, or the volume is gone up or the volume is gone down, we actually talk about the real drivers of that revenue. For example, the patient number is one of the main drivers that we are always looking at. So that's one of the most important things, that we really need to understand the business. And then once we understand the business, then we can actually start about, okay, how we can learn from it, from the past, and how we can improve the real business drivers, how we can make an impact into the drivers which actually do add value into our organization. One point here I wanted to highlight is about the 80-20 rule. Maybe what we can think about is, okay, let's thinking about, we spend about 20% of time on what has happened and why it has happened, and how we can do it is, for example, we can automate a lot of things in the analytics. We can outsource or maybe delegate. We can even eliminate some things. So so we end up spending less and less time on the things or on activity which are the least value adding activities. And then what we can do is actually focus more and more, or 80% of our remaining time, on what will happen and how we can improve it. Okay, so that of course needs focused efforts and resources, and of course real business partnering. Okay, we need to partner with the business. If we go to our next slide, I'll explain you about, I can give you a few tips about how we can be a true business partner or can collaborate more with our businesses. First of all, as I mentioned already, the most important thing is to really understand the business. We need to get out of our comfort zone where we are very comfortable with the finance. We are just happy you're talking about numbers. There is a real need and actually demand from the business for the finance business partner, finance FP&A, to actually act as a business partner for the stakeholders. Once we are, and for that, of course, we need to work on the development of the relationship, understanding the business, etc. Once we have that relationship or understanding of the business, we can work with those stakeholders and define the real KPIs, like the KPIs which actually will work as the business drivers for the business world. Another important point is to focus on terminology and avoid the business jargon as much as we can, because most of the information that we are communicating are taken by the non-finance stakeholders, and it's important that we are talking in a language that these non-finance stakeholders do understand and make the most out of it. Another tip for sure is thinking about the medium of the communication that we are talking, that we are delivering. For example, we are very comfortable in understanding or looking at a huge amount of data, a lot of numbers there, and like tables, etc. But many stakeholders sometimes do prefer to actually look at a mixture of the things. For example, charts, utilize charts somewhere, or tables as well. Sometimes we do have to use tables. Okay. Another point which is not mentioned here, which I would like to highlight, is we need to really understand the audience, what kind of audience we are talking to. Are we talking to a very senior management stakeholders who actually need this, like the very high level overview, or do we need to dive a bit more? So that's these are the few tips. Apart from the final one is the highlight the most important areas, the most important points. And please, let's keep this in mind, that yes, we have a huge amount of data available to us, but we should not fall victim of the data trap. I mean, what my colleague Lawrence actually introduced me to this term, paralysis by analysis, which I really liked actually, that we have so much data and we have so much analysis we can do that actually we are not able to move forward, and we're not able to actually utilize our efforts or attention to the areas which we or maybe our stakeholders believe adds the most of the value. So yeah, I think if we keep these points in mind, for sure we are on the right step towards creating a forward-looking and a value-creating FP&A organization. Thanks, Olga.
Thank you. Thank you, Arslan. Thank you for all your tips and all your presentation. Certainly, part of the task of data analytics is not to fall a victim of data traps, since lots of data is available. And it's time for us to move on. And actually, if you have any questions to Arslan, it's good time to ask them through our Q&A box. And it's time for me to ask you a question as well. So now it's time for polling question to our audience. Let me start it. And the question actually relates to what question your data analytics helps you answer. Let me launch this poll. So your business analytics helps you answer the following question. What has happened? Why has it happened? What will happen? And what should happen? Let's see at which stage of data analytics maturity you are. So which question describes your data analytics the best? What has happened? Why has it happened? What will happen? And what should happen? Most of you have voted by now. So let me close this poll and share the results with you. Okay, we have quite an interesting result. Most of you, 37%, have answered that your analytics answers the question, what has happened? Another big portion of you, 33%, stated that analytics helps you answer the question, why has it happened? Another 17% believe it what will happen, and 13% what should happen. Arslan, may I ask you for very quick comment to the polling results? Is it something that you have expected?
Yeah, this is very much in line with what I was expecting. I mean, it so shows that most of the organization are actually more towards the descriptive analytics or diagnostic analytics. I mean, it's good to see about 30% shifting more towards the insight or foresight or optimization side. But yeah, it's very much in line with the expectation I had.
Great. Great. I think that's the current state where we are, the most organizations are, and I think that's the main reasons why we are here, to actually learn how can we move on further in this maturity model. And now it's time for us to have a short discussion all together. So please, let's join all here with our web cameras. And the question for our group discussion is, can you go directly from descriptive to prescriptive analysis, or you need to go through all the stages? Let me start with you, Alex. What do you think?
Well, in my experience, I'd say that you need a good foundation, and I'm going to speak a little bit about that during my presentation. If you do not understand the business drivers, as Arslan said, if you do not understand how those connect with our financial performance and test that with actual results, looking a little bit and telling the story of what has really happened, to me it's very difficult to build analytics on top of that. So first, understand the business, and then it's a journey. It's a journey that you're going to follow until you become more efficient and more insightful and more prescriptive. So I'd say you don't want to skip any of those steps.
Right. So it's rather a journey than a big, huge leap. Correct. Lawrence, let me move on to you and ask you the same question. Do we need to go through all these stages, or we can jump there?
Well, I think the right ambition is to get as far right as you possibly can, but I completely agree with Alex that you can't just hang a sign on your door that says business partner and say, well, I'm a business partner, right? You really have to earn the right to call yourself a business partner. And it really does begin with developing a really deep understanding of the business before you can contribute to it.
Great. That certainly makes sense. And Arslan, it goes back to you. How do you think? Should we go through all the stages, or we can jump right there?
Yeah, I fully agree with Alex and Lawrence, which just said thing. But I would say one thing which is important is it's a journey, and what we do feel, as we have seen from the polls as well, that we get stuck into the first two stages, and the aim is to minimize the duration that we're spending into the first stage or first two stages, and shift as quickly as possible to the next one, to more prescriptive or predictive analytics. So yeah, it's a journey, but we should focus and make conscious efforts to shift towards that as quickly or as efficiently as possible.
Right. Indeed, it seems like the most difficult step is shift from diagnostic to already predictive analytics. And that's something we can talk about now. Next chapter, let us move to our second presentation of the evening. Alex Baird will be talking about connected FP&A and agile scenario management. Alex, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Olga, and thanks everyone for attending. I'm gonna be speaking a lot from experience. I've been fortunate to lead FP&A transformation at Guardian Industries and now at Owens Corning, two big global manufacturing companies. And it's an area that it's really exciting for me because I really see how much value us as financial professionals can bring to the organization if we get this right. So hopefully I'll be able to give some good tips for you guys to implement in your organizations. As Arslan said, and there's going to be some overlap obviously on what I'm going to explain, but to me everything starts with a strong foundation. And the foundation always goes back to sitting down with the different functions, understanding the business and working with them to identify what are the key profitability drivers. What are those things that really matter, and focus on those. You'll see that there's a lot of KPIs once you sit down with those guys, and your job is going to be explaining to them how those impact our financial performance, and then decide which ones are the ones that we really should focus on, track, and model for our financial models. It is very important. We all know that we have limited resources, and the key is to understand how to deploy those resources to have the maximum impact. So identifying those key profitability drivers to me is foundational. Then what we do with those is basically we link those drivers to the actual financial performance. We want to use models that do the work for us. We don't want to have to start grabbing those inputs and then put them in somewhere. We have technology that allows us to create these models. The most simple one is Excel, but as we think about efficiency and scalability on big organizations, you're going to see there's many other superior tools than Excel to accomplish that. By linking those drivers to the financial performance, we're just going to be finding ourselves explaining what actually happened and what may happen once you start thinking about future forecasting or scenarios. What may happen to our financials as we tweak or change or expect different inputs for those drivers. When we then look at the actual financial performance, we're not going to be talking to our business partners in terms of, oh, our revenue went up, as Arslan said. No, we're going to be able to say our revenue went up because either my volume went up, or I got a superior mix on my products, or basically I drove pricing up. Or even in the case of multinational organizations, we have an FX impact, whether good or bad, in our foreign sales. Same thing we can apply to our revenue, our earnings walk, right? We have different impactors of EBITDA or earnings depending on what measure you use, and we can look at those in terms of KPIs that make sense to our business partners. So if our variable cost goes up, we're going to be able to see how much of that is result of usage or efficiency or a result of inflation of those inputs. That becomes very powerful because that gives us the right to sit at the table and to provide insight. At the end of the day, by telling the story, we're providing insight, and then we will be able to earn our rights and be more, let's say, influential on our insights. And that should be our goal, to become influential, to provide insight, and be a voice at the table. Can you go to the next slide, please, Olga? Because once we have the foundation, then the key is how to leverage that foundation in order to become a more agile business. and how we can react to what's happening in the world in a fast way, because that is becoming, especially in a volatile environment, that we have a competitive advantage. So we have the foundation. We leverage technology in order to spend more time looking at the results and not so much time about data aggregation and computing, and then we can become more agile. And one of the key areas for agility to me is the ability to build different scenarios. To me, the time where we spend 3-4 months putting together one operations plan or business plan for the following calendar year, those times to me are gone. I mean, we find ourselves in a situation where 1 month into the calendar year, we find our ops plan to be obsolete. And that is because so many of the assumptions are different than what we thought they were back in, I don't know, August, September, where we're putting together those plans. So to me, the key for agility is, yes, we can have a base scenario that we consider our ops plan, but the key to me is, since we have the foundation and we are able to produce different scenarios by tweaking our input assumptions and do that in an efficient way, we can then have a range of outcomes already ready to go. It's kind of like my playbook in terms of sports. What if this happens? This is how we should react. We found ourselves in a similar situation back at Guardian when we had to decide what plans to keep running during COVID, and we were looking at different options based on supply, based on demand, based on now we're looking at energy costs to decide which furnaces are more efficient and which aren't. So it becomes to a point where if energy goes up to certain levels, we know which assets should be we should consider to idle, and which assets should take that supply. So having all that ready gives us the ability to react to changing reality a lot faster. And I know Lauren's going to talk a lot more about scenario management, but to me is one of the things that it's critical. Again, you can only do that only if you have a strong foundation. You understand the drivers, you connect those drivers to financial performance, you leverage technology in order to be able to process those different scenarios without a lot of effort, and then have the discussion with the key stakeholders in your company to decide those plans, what's going to be base, what's going to be contingency, and be ready for what reality holds for you. That's what I've seen working in my organizations, and I think that that is the key of connected FP&A in the modern world. It's a great opportunity, guys, to become business partners and have a place at the table. So I invite all of you to get into the journey.
Great, thank you, Alex. Thank you for the invitation, and I really like that you brought in the concept of this playbook, the ability to react to those scenarios we actually develop during our predictive stage. That's something we will elaborate on right now, and we will ask our audience is how advanced is this scenario management? Let me launch a second poll for tonight's session. So the question is, how advanced is your scenario management? We do not use scenarios at all, that's an option. Another, simple Excel-based scenario planning, or we use Excel-based or automated driver-based model, or we use multidimensional scenario management. Let's see where we stand. So how advanced is our scenario management? No scenarios, Excel-based scenario planning, Excel-based or automated driver-based model, or multi-dimensional scenario management. Thank you all for your answers. Let me close the poll and share the results with you. So we see that absolute majority of our participants has stated that Simple Excel-based scenario planning is in place in 56% of cases. Another big group, 26%, say it's Excel-based or automated driver-based model, so you're already at the stage of driver-based planning. Only 12% of you don't use scenarios at all, and 6% are already at the leading stage with multi-dimensional scenario management. Alex, can I ask you for very brief comment to these results? What do you think?
Yeah, it's to be expected. I think we as financial professionals, we all love Excel, right? So it is agile. It's there for us to use, and it's very easy for us. The only thing I would say is that I would invite you to explore the technologies that exist out there that can do anything we do in Excel, but in a more, let's say, scalable and controlled way. You will find that if you have that strong foundation, especially if you have those Excel models already built, you will find a way to have the same exact functionality using this more advanced technology, and get away from the shortcomings that Excel has, which is mainly lack of scalability and control.
Right. Thank you for this comment. And it's time for us to engage in a brief mini discussion with all of you. So please join me here. And the second question for tonight is, how can we make sure that our scenario management is not just another time-consuming FP&A activity? And let me start with you, Lawrence. What do you think? How we can avoid this mistake?
Well, I think two things. One is focusing on a handful of scenarios rather than trying to model 30,000 different possible outcomes. That's one that's very practical. And then the other thing is, I did want to comment that I think it was like 6% are doing multi-dimensional scenario planning. It doesn't surprise me at all, because trying to do that in Excel would make anybody tear their hair out, right? And you'd never really feel very comfortable about the numbers anyway, right? Too many opportunities for errors. So technology enablement can be very, very helpful.
Great. Two practical tips right away from Lawrence. Arslan, the word goes to you. What do you think? How we can make sure that it actually brings value?
Yeah, just as Lawrence mentioned about making sure we spend our time or utilize our time in doing what actually matters the most, right? There can be many drivers in the business, and we can end up spending times in trillions of millions of scenarios. So let's make sure we really understand what matters and what actually is going to happen. We should actually think about the probability as well, right? Before we invest time in scenarios, let's think about the probability of how likely it is to happen the scenario. If there is a scenario which is very less likely to span and we have a limited number of resources, let's make sure we spend time on that accordingly.
Right. And Alex, back to you. What do you think? How we can make sure that scenario management brings value?
Yeah, not much to add. I'd say two things. One, we already talked about what really matters. I call that magnitude. How big is the impact? And second, what is the probability distribution, meaning how volatile that input is. So we're going to focus on those inputs that are important, meaning have impact, and those inputs that we see wider range of outcomes, because I would give a perfect example, energy cost these days, right? So look for those and build your scenario based on those two key measures and not more than that.
Great. And actually, we will elaborate on that in our next session. We'll speak about how we can react to those scenarios, what we can practically do to address them. And who else than Lawrence Servan answer this question better? Lawrence will be speaking about scenario management insights. Lawrence, the stage is yours.
Excellent. All right. Why don't we just get right into it? So I'm a former FP&A manager for Pepsi-Cola International, having spent a couple of years with Pepsi in New York and then 2 of the best years of my life with Pepsi in Cork, Ireland. And you won't often find me quoting somebody from Coke because of that reason. But This is one of my favorite quotes around scenario management, and it comes from John Murphy, who's the Chief Financial Officer of Coca-Cola. And he actually participated in an event up at MIT. And here's what he had to say. And usually I don't read slides, but I really want to read this quote. I think it's so on point. He said, "I've become less and less a fan of the term scenario planning in the last 9 months." And again, that was kind of like at the peak of COVID. He said, "Because I've discovered in our case, it tends to be an exercise in sounding intelligent about the future." Wow, that was very blunt. But I don't think he's alone in that. And then he went on to say, I think of it more as scenario management than scenario planning. And in that regard, we have very much sharpened our approach to having plan B, plan C, plan D available and implementable. And that's a really key word fairly quickly. And the quote actually continues on the next page. He said, so instead of saying, here's the scenario, let's construct stuff around it, he said, here's the scenario, how are we going to manage it? So again, you can't do this with 14,000 scenarios. You really have to focus your time, your attention on the handful that are likely, and as Alex said, the ones that have the biggest magnitude. So the image I wanted to share today on this topic, you'll see at the top that there's a specific initiative, and that initiative is really in response to a given scenario, and there's a full P&L impact for that initiative. In other words, here's how we're going to respond if scenario A happens. But then down in the middle of the screen, you see it's not just one initiative or one project. There's a whole kind of list here of possible responses and initiatives, projects given the scenario. And then down at the bottom of the screen, you see the likely scenarios. So is it scenario A, scenario B, scenario C? Depending upon the scenario, the checkboxes indicate this project or this initiative is going to be initiated if this scenario actually comes to pass. So that is, again, very challenging to do in Excel and keep it all straight and feel confident about the numbers, but this is where technology can help. There's another important requirement that we'll be talking about on the next page. And that requirement is what I refer to as interlocking views. And what this means is that all combinations are synchronized and that a change in any one view automatically updates and gets reflected appropriately in the other views. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you take a look at that first column, this is a very traditional way to look at the business. You've got the enterprise, then underneath that regions, underneath that states, and then cities. And I've intentionally genericize this, but that's kind of a traditional way of looking at things. But then if you move to the column to the right, sometimes you actually want to look at it a little bit differently, or senior executives want to look at it a little bit differently. You want to look at it by division, by product categories, then by products, maybe even down to SKU level. But changes in any one of those dimensions or views should automatically be reflected elsewhere. And then on the far right, yet another example. Sometimes you want to look at it by sales VPs, then sales managers, then sales people. So again, changes to any one view automatically get reflected everywhere else. And this is critical not only to scenario management, but I think to just plain a straightforward planning and forecasting. Often you really do want to look at things from different perspectives, different views, but you need to keep everything in sync. On the next slide, I'd like to talk about one of the biggest risks to this whole process. And that's what I call the strategy budgeting connection. And I had an old manager used to say, no budget means no action, right? What gets funded gets done. So in my experience as a consultant with Deloitte, with KPMG, worked with hundreds of companies, and often saw them set strategic goals, and then even develop good plans to achieve those strategic goals, and then go one step further and develop real plans, well-defined plans to achieve them, define projects to achieve those plans. But where I often saw the misstep was incorporating that all into the budget. So I know there's a lot of talk about beyond budgeting and everything else, and that's terrific. But right today, still the budget process is still where the actual resources get allocated. So you really need straight through processing of strategy through budgeting. And on my last slide, I'd like to share 4 recommendations. Now, this is hardly an exhaustive list, but I think it's more of a starting point. The first is that the technology really needs to accommodate initiative planning. So being able to build a baseline and then layer initiatives or projects on top of that, again, all in kind of a P&L view. You need to be able to point and click to include or exclude any of those projects or initiatives from your scenario. And you need to be able to accommodate changes for any perspective at the top of the house, the bottom of the house, by region, by salesperson, by customer, by business unit, and again, keep that all in sync. And then finally, you really need straight through processing of strategy right through budgeting. So you need to be able to accommodate both that strategic view as well as the budget, which is where the real allocation of resources happens. And with that, we'll bring Olga back online.
Thank you, Lawrence, for such a positive ending. And I think that it's time for us to move on and all together have a short session on key takeaways. So please join me here on the webcam. And I will start now with Arslan. And I'll ask you to give us 30 seconds takeaway. So literally one sentence on what was a key idea for you throughout the whole webinar. What was it for you, Arslan?
For me, the key takeaway is there is a need by the business community, by our stakeholders, for us to be the key or strategic business partner. There is a need, there is a demand, and there are tools out there, of course, right? It's just a mindset, and it's us as a community who needs to make that shift and make some conscious efforts to actually cater for those needs and become true business partner, which will be really adding value and valued by our peers.
Right. So collaboration is a good point, even though we speak about advanced analytics, because otherwise, for whom are we doing it? Alex,
Exactly.
Let me move on to you and ask you the same question. What was key takeaway for you?
To me, is that we are living in unprecedented volatile times, right? It's very difficult to predict what's going to happen, and there's a big appetite for for agile management. And I think it's the perfect opportunity for us to demonstrate that that the finance community can provide the tools to become more agile and more efficient into driving our business through volatility. And it's a great opportunity for us to earn our seat at the table. And I think we should aspire to that. And in order to do that, again, go back to the foundation, to build your models, to sit down with the key stakeholders and leverage technology to provide those solutions that our businesses desperate need during these times. So again, perfect opportunity, perfect chance for us to be that go-to person that it's important in the organization.
Great. I like that you see it as an opportunity, not a challenge for a FP&A team. Let me give it reward back to you, Lawrence. What do you think? What's key takeaway for you?
Well, I think after listening to Arslan and Alex, I think one big takeaway for me is that finance can actually drive business change. And I think, a lot of us that, spent quality time, checking invoices and maybe making journal entries, that might seem like a stretch. But if you really listen to Arslan and Alex, it's about finance influencing business change. It's about finance helping the business move forward. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity there.
Great. And actually, we've received huge, enormous amounts of questions regarding this webinar because many people have connected. So I've picked several questions for you to answer now. All the rest we'll try to answer in writing to you. And let me start with you, Alex. Here is a question addressed directly to you, and it relates to business drivers, to profitability drivers. Alex, can you please give us some examples of profitability drivers in different functions and how you align them with KPIs? Some examples.
Yeah, in case of demand, the top line, we are interested in bringing in our forecast in terms of units and prices, so we can measure volume price mix. That would be the minimum requirement of our driver-based model. In terms of variable costs, we're very interested in bringing in usage and unit cost in order to measure efficiency and inflation as we explain what's happening. Currency is a big input for international global businesses, because we know that as we report in USD, for example, we're going to be impacted by what happened with our euro-based operations. Those are a few. Then obviously headcount is a big driver for us, so especially in OPEX. So we want to have a good idea what happens to our headcount planning going on and drive labor costs based on our assumptions on headcount. Those just a few to mention. And again, I would say start simple and keep diving into those areas where we see the most either volatility or impact, right? Don't try to go deep on your first go in your model. Start basic and keep going to the next level or lower levels in your hierarchy only when you need to, and only by exception, only when you have noise and you realize that you need to go deeper, then you go. But if you can tell the story with a simple model, is much better than telling the story with a complex model.
Very true, very true. Lawrence, let me move on to you and ask you a question. You have described us the way how you deal with different initiatives, how you use different initiatives in the mini P&Ls to actually include them in your plans. But how do you deal with black swan events, something unexpected that has big impact? Is this principle similar to initiatives you described, or it's completely different?
So I think the topic of black swan is a really interesting one, but I just want to very quickly build on something that Alex said in terms of examples of drivers. And I just saw this last week, but one of our clients is a global hotel company. And finance, about 3 years ago, kind of built an initiative around identifying drivers and how they impact the P&L. So they look at all sorts of things. They look at productivity, and if productivity is improving, then they can do more with less. That is a bottom line impact. But they've gone beyond that. They're taking a look at reputation analysis, semantic analysis to understand how the world is actually viewing their product. And if it's being viewed very well, that might be an opportunity for certain property to raise their prices. They even brought in weather projections, because weather has a huge impact on occupancy at the hotel. So I did want to mention that briefly. But in terms of black swan, it's a really fun topic, but if it's a true black swan, it's something that nobody even talked about. And then you just have to be really agile in terms of saying, okay, this surprised us, perhaps it shouldn't have. That's an important caveat. Why were we surprised? Let's do an after action review and understand why this blindsided us. What is it with our planning process that made us completely miss this in our thinking about scenarios? But truly, black swan, nobody could have ever possibly predicted it. You just need to be very agile in terms of building out almost in real time that scenario, right? So what are we going to do? What are the initiatives, projects? How are we actually going to respond to this? Put that into that P&L impact so we can do the projection.
Right, right. So being agile, trying to build it right away with a whole new scenario, not just the kind of pieces and as initiatives. Thank you for practical answer, and let me move on to you, Arslan. You were speaking a lot about collaboration when using analytics, and here comes quite a challenging question in terms of collaboration. If there is an attitude in the business when business team keeps business information minimum with FP&A, so really doesn't share much, how to change that?
So when like there is a hesitance to share information to the finance, right? So what we need to understand, why do we have this situation? So historically or traditionally, and even we have seen in the poll answer that we got, we have been considered as a cost center most of the time. We are seen as someone who are actually only talking about past, who are looking at the historical data. This has happened, and sometimes people see us as a bottleneck. That's where I was saying, we really need to revive that focus, and we really need to shift that focus so our business partners can actually see us as partners who will add value, who will not only utilize the data and use the data to just challenge them, but actually to support them to be able to overcome the challenges that they will face, right? And for that, we need to develop that relationship with them. We need to develop that rapport, and they gain that confidence that yes, we also understand the business. We are not just the ones who are blocking the investment, let's say. We are actually the ones who really understand the business, and we can assist them in analyzing the business or preparing, maybe, let's say, the business case to be able to unlock the investment that the business needs all the time, right? So it's about gaining that confidence and developing that relationship when we know the business, and we are not just someone or folks who are just crunching the numbers and just acting as a gatekeeper only. We really need to become a partner for them, and it's all about that. Once people will realize that yes, he is a partner, he's going to support us in this, or he's going to get some insights in order to be able to add value for our future. I'm sure, and I have seen in our organizations that people start working more collaboratively with you.
Great. Thank you for this practical advice, for quite elaborate answer. And I have several questions coming in around the skill set. So let me ask all of you this question. We have established that the biggest challenge is this transition from diagnostic to predictive analytics. This step is the most challenging. Which skills we as FP&A team need to make this step? Maybe some technical skills. So there was already some suggestions in the questions, such as machine learning. So maybe which skills in general we need to make this shift? Let me start with you, Alex. What do you think?
Yeah, historically, if you think about the finance typical skills, we're good at transactional and at analytics, right? But we're not maybe as good as communicators or telling the story. And this is becoming more of a where technology is helping us is precisely doing the analytics and the transactional work. And what we should be spending more time is on the storytelling and on the insight and providing insight for profitable action. So I think that's where we have to expand our skill set, get our comfort zone, and become true business partners and speak the languages of the same language as our internal customer, and not so much our financial jargon. I think that's where the challenge in terms of skill set lies, and we're going to have to evolve to that. I mean, we have to shift from doing the work that the machines can do for us now to doing the work that professionals are expecting us to do.
Nice, very nice answer. Thank you for that, Alex. Lawrence, what do you think? How we should change our skill set as FP&A to be up to this change?
Well, I think I've got a couple of thoughts on that. One is, I have spoken to people in finance who believe that they have to become data scientists, and maybe they need to go back, they need to get an advanced degree. The truth of the matter is, your biggest contribution to the business depends on how well you actually know the business. So again, being a student of the business, investing your time there. But I will add a technical note. Years ago, when I was at Deloitte, we were hired by a pharmaceutical company to help them project their sales, because they kept missing the mark with their sales projections. So we developed a very sophisticated algorithm to project sales. And then a very smart person on the team said, rather than one algorithm, maybe we should actually use this other algorithm and see where they meet in the middle. Then somebody else said, wait a minute, I've got a third algorithm that I think will, well, before we knew it, we were up to more than 50 algorithms, and we were taking the average of the algorithms, right? Boy, did that take a lot of time, and it took a lot of mental power. Today, there are tools that will literally run that entire process, run more than 50 algorithms based on history, use that history to project the future, and identify which algorithm would have given you the best answer. So, instead of paying, an outside consultant a lot of money to do that, it can now be done by a finance person without any specialized data scientist type training. The last point I'd like to mention is one of just attitude, which is, as finance people, as we move up that chain in terms of business partner, we have to be able to deal with ambiguity. And that's something that as an accountant, finance person, you're trained to minimize, right? You've got debits and credits and journal entries, and they better be right. So we're really not accustomed to dealing with ambiguity. When you're talking about projecting the future, you're talking about a lot of inherent ambiguity, and you have to have a mental perspective, attitude to deal with that ambiguity.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lawrence, for this elaborate answer, for an example that we actually don't have to be data scientists to deal with quite advanced things these days. Arslan, what's your opinion? Which skills we need to develop?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot more to add compared to what already Alex has, Lawrence has said, but yeah, I'll just summarize, considering the time as well, very quickly. We want to shift from the analytics and shift or revive our image from, being the gatekeeper to actually someone who is the partner. And we tend to have very good skills in, analytics skills, for example, problem solving, or technology, etc., or strategic thinking. I feel for the future of FP&A, we really need to work on developing the business relationships, understanding more about the business, and also, like Alex was saying, about the storytelling skill. These are the few skills which I feel, to become a support member or like a true business partner, some of the skills which we really need to work hard on, and I think the business will really value in future.
Thank you. Thank you, Arslan, for your answers, and thank you, everyone, for your answers. What's left to me is actually to thank our audience for sending in so many questions today. We'll try to answer them in writing afterwards. And bear with me for several closing slides. The first of all, I want to invite all of you to take part in our 2022 FP&A Trend Survey. It won't take more than 12 minutes, and it's certainly worth joining. Besides that, let me invite you to the couple of upcoming events. It's another FP&A Trends webinar about digital FP&A in practice with a practical case study there, and another webinar about top 5 FP&A challenges and how to address them. Looking forward to both of them. Let me thank again our sponsor of the event, Board, which actually helps you to reach your goals and drive digital transformation across your organization. Besides that, you can join us, you can join FP&A Trends Global Community using one of these options. Please choose the one that suits you the most. And the last thing, don't leave without taking part in a 1-minute feedback after this session is over. It's very important for us. My dear panelists, thank you so much for being here with us, for sharing your knowledge, for answering our questions. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us tonight. Look forward to seeing you again. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.